Yeah, so in case that intro sequence wasn't enough for you, the goal that I've decided to pursue this month is to finish a marathon, run a marathon. In the last, I'd say 2 years, I've gotten really into distance running culture, stuff like that. Read a ton of books, listened to a ton of podcasts, but the point of this video is just to document my journey from going to where I am now, which is decent at running, to getting to a place where I can run a marathon. The longest I've ever run up to this point is probably 7 or 8 miles. I'm fairly confident I could finish a half marathon from where I'm starting, but I'm giving myself 30 days to work up to a place where I'm comfortable running a marathon. Maybe not comfortable, but can finish it at the very least and recover afterwards. So, truthfully, I'm recording this after already finishing week 1 of my training regimen, which is going to involve gradually increasing the number of miles I run in a week by a little bit more than the recommended average. Before I began this challenge, I was averaging around 19 or 20 miles a week, according to my Strava, which is basically just a running app. I'm gonna try and get that number up to probably around 35, 40 miles in a week, so that I know I have that in the tank to be able to run that many miles over the course of a week. Whether that's enough to finish a marathon, we'll find out at the end of the video, I guess. I'm gonna pay a good amount of attention to kind of what I'm putting in my body, make sure I'm drinking enough water, make sure that I'm stretching, because that's something I don't do enough of, make sure I'm dedicating time to recovery, rest, ice, elevate, compress, right? And so I started my training, I'm a week in right now, but I started my training on August 31st, and I'm going to run the marathon on October 3rd. So that gives me a little bit more than a month, but I think it counts still. Yeah, so this is my journey toward running a marathon. Let's see. So in my first week of training, I decided to bump myself straight up to 25 miles in a week, which was a pretty significant jump, considering that much of the past 2 years I've been running fewer than 15 per week. I'd recently been increasing my mileage in anticipation of pursuing a bigger running goal. Thankfully, it didn't feel too terrible, the 25 mile week, and I was able to carry that momentum into the second week, where I targeted 28 miles in total. And it would be the first time that my weekly mileage would exceed the total number of miles run in a single marathon. So, now in the middle of a run in week 2, and I actually saw something really cool that made me want to start recording while I was running. Obviously, coronavirus has impacted a lot of people, and having gone to school in Boston, one of the biggest events of the year is the Boston Marathon. An old boss of mine had been training for probably a year and a half and had to call off her marathon this year, and that includes all of the fundraising, everything like that goes into it, which sucks. But I think it's really cool that people are doing these virtual marathons and stuff on their own. And what made me think about that is, as I was running on my usual running trail, I saw a bunch of stuff scribbled in chalk, encouraging words for someone that was doing the virtual Boston Marathon, which is really cool. I think that it's, it's cool to see that even in a time like this, people are still knocking out big goals, pursuing things, and without all of the fanfare, just taking care of business. I just finished an 8-mile run in the middle of week 2 of training still. Longest I've ever run, I'm pretty sure, to this point. On top of just the pure distance consideration of running 28 miles in a week, I actually painted myself into a little bit of a corner. I'd forgotten completely that I would be camping out over the weekend in upstate New York near Ithaca, so I needed to get in at least 90% of the running before I left at noon on Friday. This included a 3-day stretch where I sandwiched a PR distance run of 8 miles between 2 days of running 5 miles. Truthfully, I was pretty surprised I felt fresh after that stretch, and I was actually able to enjoy an awesome outdoor weekend with some buddies that I hadn't seen in a few months.
Yeah, I just tried to like lay down and eat shit. Oh, yeah, get the back. I've been up here, it's nice too.
All right, so at this point in the video, I figured that I would sit down and kind of talk you guys through how I went from this guy to this guy. How I went from a guy who was averaging a part-time job's worth of Counter-Strike per week to someone that is, you know, taking up fitness goals like running a marathon. And it really kind of goes back to freshman year of college. Basically, it took me until the second semester of freshman year at college to realize that I was pretty overweight. I was nearing 250 pounds, and even though I'm like tall at 6'2", that's not a healthy weight. And so I set my mind to losing weight that summer and the following year into the following summer. So over the course of 2 years, I lost 60 pounds through like just counting calories and going to the gym and just paying more attention to what I was putting into my body and stuff like that. Over the course of that experience, I learned a lot of valuable lessons about myself, about fitness, about consistent effort. By the spring of sophomore year, I was really primed for what happened next, which was stumbling across this YouTube channel called Yes Theory. Super popular channel. My friends roll their eyes every time I talk about them, but their kind of message resonates with me pretty strongly. So I was primed to stumble upon their channel the summer after sophomore year. And the first video that I watched of theirs was one where one of the main guys goes and runs a marathon with no training. Are you seeing where I'm going with this? At the end of the video, he talks about this book, Born to Run, which is like a New York Times bestseller, and it's just a great story on top of dishing out life lessons. And for me, it really reframed how I viewed running. Because until that point, running was just something that I did as like, you know, a punishment for like when we didn't do good in ultimate frisbee practice, the coach made us run. And so I never really ran for pleasure or even for fitness. It was just kind of like something that I only did when I had to. And that summer, since I was, leave it. You can't see, but there's a dog here. He's about to be in frame. Yeah, yeah, I'm recording. You gotta go, you gotta go. The summer after sophomore year, I started doing distance running. So pretty much come the summer of, you know, sophomore year of college, I had lost my 60 pounds. I had gotten into the like gateway of endurance running culture and kind of the like self-improvement genre on YouTube, just from like a viewing standpoint. And so I was primed to kind of fall into the spiral of like endurance athletes, podcasts, other books about endurance running. And it coincided actually pretty nicely with one of my goals that I had set for myself at I got near the beginning of college, end of high school, is to hike the Appalachian Trail, which is an endurance thing. It takes 5 to 7 months, and you hike, you know, 15 miles a day with 40 pounds on your back, and you'd go from Maine to Georgia, so pretty much the entire east coast of the US. And it was something that I wanted to do for myself that I could see reflecting in distance running. The coalescence of all those different things kind of coming together in like a time of life when you're primed for big changes and, you know, developing better habits for the most part. It became a big part of my day-to-day routine to this day. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much where I'm coming from here. and I want to run a marathon. So we're going to get back to your regularly scheduled programming. So back to the marathon training. Weeks 3 and 4 were pretty significant jumps for me in terms of total mileage. And also, I had a number of runs that were the longest runs I'd ever done, which is, the point of doing this challenge. But that trend continued. So the third week, I ran 32 miles, up from 28, with a long run of 13.1 miles. I ran my first half marathon. Felt pretty wiped out afterwards. Both of my calves were cramping. I needed to sit down, drink some water, have a banana. But afterwards, I actually felt okay. And then the fourth week, I had a 17-mile run and totaled 36 total miles for the week. Both of those weeks were big jumps. I was impressed. I felt okay after both of those super long runs, even the next day. And the 17-mile run, in truth, didn't feel too different from the 13-mile run. Obviously, 26 is a whole other can of worms, and we'll see how that goes. But I felt pretty good after the 4 weeks of training that I set out for myself. At this point, it was the last week before the marathon, and I wanted to spend it recovering, only running a few miles here and there, but then also kind of checking in on some friends who had run marathons and getting their expertise. So this next segment actually is just a conversation with two of my old Frisbee teammates and buddies from Boston University, and they have both run a marathon, and they offered some insight, some expertise. So we'll cut to that now. I would say start with your training. I know, Nick, you trained really, really hard.
I did. I had run a half before in my senior year of college. Sorry, I ran a half marathon. And at the time, I was like, that was 13 miles. I could not do any more than that. And then 2 years later, I was like, what if I ran a marathon? So for the 4 months leading up to that, I did progressive mileage. I would run 5 days a week, on weekends doing progressively longer runs. And then I capped out at about 20 miles was my longest training run before I actually did the race itself. I did 20 miles maybe 4 weeks before I ran, and then kind of scaled down before then to the point where before I ran, I was doing a very small mileage week in advance of that.
Okay.
So yeah, I trained pretty seriously. And this fucker, tell me what you did.
I didn't train for.
You didn't train at all.
I don't think you can say I didn't train at all. Because up until 3 weeks before, I was running a fair amount. But I was probably running 3 or 4 times a week. If it was during the week, I'd run 5 or 6 miles. If it was not during the week, I'd run 8 miles.
Okay.
And I ran one 16-mile run a month and a half before, but that was the longest I ever did.
Yeah. The longest I've run thus far was 17 last weekend. And I'm not really gunning for a time, but it was there a mile or a time that you passed it and you were like, oh my God, this isn't happening.
I have an interesting story in this regard. The day of my race, my pre-race snack was a pack of dried mango, which for the following reasons I will strongly not recommend. I had terrible indigestion the entire race, and I could not get rid of it. And some of my friends were coming with me to watch me run, and at the 17-mile mark, they ran up with me, they pulled up their car and they're like, "Yay, Nick, you're running a marathon. How do you feel?" And I turned to them and said, "I want to fucking die," because my indigestion was really peaking at that point. And then shortly after that, I pulled over to the side of the road. I'm like, I'm going to throw up right now. They're going to see me do this and make me not finish the race. And I aggressively dry heaved, and then I was like, oh, I'm fine. whatever was in my system, it's like not there anymore. I didn't throw up. It was great.
Got the devil out.
And the rest, like the next, I guess that'll be the next 9 miles. And I was like, cool, I'm chilling. But there was a point like that was like my rock bottom, like the 17-mile mark where I'm like, I'm going to throw up right now. I'm not going to finish this race. 4 months of training out the window. Didn't happen. And then I was fine.
I mean, I think the whole time for me until okay, so the course that we did was like sort of, it was like an out and then you came partway back, and so I think it was like
mine was also not back. Yeah,
it was like mile 18 that it like looped back around, and I think it wasn't until like maybe a mile or two before that I was like, oh, I kind of have to do this because like I'm gonna have to walk back there. So it's like I'm either running this or walking it. But I think before that I was not really convinced that I was going to do the whole thing.
What is your route like that you organized? Are you doing an out and back or a loop?
So I drew out the route myself. It's gonna go down like one of the main like roads that kind of go through all of the suburbs, and it crosses a trail that then is also like a half marathon length. So I'm like going out until it crosses the trail and then coming back, and it's like a perfect marathon length. So
I think for mental motivation, the out and back works really well. It's like when you're on your way back, you're like, I've done this before, I know where this is.
You've seen stuff.
Yeah. That was, I think, the race that both George and I did was an out and back marathon. And I think it worked very well.
Well, thankfully, my parents and Melissa are here, and they're like making a day of it and like driving like from stop to stop. So they'll be handing me gels and, you know, things like that.
If you had supporters along the way,
Yeah.
so I feel like that's helpful.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I don't think I couldn't do this unsupported for sure.
Okay, today's the day. I'm up a little bit early. I'm not running yet, but I picked out my route. This past week, I spent resting mostly. I only ran 5 miles, so hopefully I have it in the legs, have it in the tank today. Yeah, here we go.
Safety pin.
Oh, even I was about to ask.
So let's put your bib on. I don't know how long it's gonna last.
All right, we're underway. It's a little bit chilly, feeling good, but I gotta pee, to be completely honest.
All right, wrapping up the first segment, and I just peed behind a business complex. Let's get it.
Idiot, dummy, dummy.
Shit.
I made a comment. What's up, beast?
Let's see you guys.
1 hour in.
Yeah. Damn. So was work actually crazy, or did you just rip that story?
No. That story's real, man. I just didn't actually have to go up today. Holy crap. So, that was real special. I pull into the first stop after around 7 miles. And my best buddy Colin, Steve, show up, and it's a whole surprise. And I was surprised. No,
He
when
said
we
he
were
was-
playing games, he was covering for Steve. When he was like, oh, Steve's door is shut. I think he doesn't want to be disturbed.
Good stuff.
I'll see you at Wegmans.
Boston, 40.
Go!
Watch out, Alex. All right, here we go. Past that halfway point. Right calf tightening up a little bit. Feeling good. All right, I'm finishing mile 20. I just stopped for the third time. I am really scraping along here. I'm being followed by the drone right now. But I'll be honest, my calves feel pretty bad, but they feel worse when I stop than when I'm moving. So I think I'm just gonna be moving until the end. Oh boy, here we go, last 6 miles. Last 2 miles, here we go.